The end of JoJolion. It's something every fan of the part has either thought of or theorized about before, and although JoJolion coming to a conclusion may seem like something in the far future, it might actually be sooner than we think. JoJolion started its monthly serialization on May 19th, 2011, and a little over 6 years later, JoJolion is currently on chapter 66, and more so than lately, it seems like every chapter is bringing us closer and closer to the part's climax, with the latest chapters heavily focusing on what we can only assume is setting up the final enemy or group of enemies. So as for JoJolion's ending, I think we can expect the final chapters to be in the late 80s to mid 90s, somewhere around chapter 92, almost exactly 2 years from now. All parts of JoJo that include stands have always been around the same length, some a little bit longer and some a little bit shorter, but the average being about 17 volumes long. Except for Steel Ball Run, coming in at a whopping 24 volumes. But Steel Ball Run is a bit special, as it was the first part to be released monthly with longer chapters rather than weekly, as well as having somewhat of an extended ending to reinforce the constant that is fate being present in all parts and all universes of JoJo. As after the part's initial climax and battle of Johnny and Gyro versus Funny Valentine, the main villain, ended, it continued on for another volume and a half because Joestars and Brandos are fated to fight each other. A rivalry to span across universes forever. So I doubt JoJolion will be as long or longer than Steel Ball Run's 95 chapter count, but will still be a longer part as it seems the parts written monthly are having a trend to be. But then again, I can't say that with much confidence, as in JoJolion's most recent chapter 66, we are just barely introduced to the main villain of the part by having their motives revealed, but still no names or identities. Compare JoJolion's current progress to Steel Ball Run. In Steel Ball Run chapter 66, we had already had our main villain established for years, and we're already beginning the final battle, D4C Part 1. And since Steel Ball Run's very early chapters were still weekly and shorter, Steel Ball Run chapter 66 is probably closer to JoJolion chapter 59 or 60. So there is a possibility of JoJolion being an odd part out and having an exceptionally long run, but based on the series history, I have faith it will be in similar length to its previous part. So now that we have a rough estimate of when JoJolion will be ending, we can get on to the main point of the video. Plot points that need to be addressed before its ending. JoJo parts are pretty good with tying things up nicely and not leaving too many questions, other than a few that come to mind like Josuke saving Josuke, which I actually did a video on, Dio using Hermit Purple, and other things like that. Those were clearly just plot points Araki decided to drop or take the part in a different direction, but through the years Araki has gotten better at not leaving so many questions behind with the ending of each part. But JoJolion has me a bit worried, as with more than a few things, I don't know if Araki is going to bring them back into the story with an explanation that makes sense and works well, or just forgot or decided to drop them from the story entirely. So to start off, let's talk about the first anomaly that appeared in the part. The Walleyes. In the beginning of JoJolion, the Walleyes were introduced as a very important aspect of the part in this different Morio, being these bizarre protrusions that suddenly grew out of the ground the same day as the Great Earthquake with no explanation for their existence after being investigated by multiple researchers. Some of the interesting dialogue from their introduction that was used by Yasuo was, the fault line stretched 10 kilometers from the south, as if protecting us from something that would be coming from the sea, making the readers think that at some point in the story they would serve some sort of purpose for existing, or foreshadowing an enemy or natural disaster that would come from the sea. But we are yet to see anything like that come into fruition unless you really stretched it and you said maybe a lot of the rock humans or members of the Rokakaka trade that came over by boat to Japan and Morio were those enemies that would come from the sea. But that just seems like something that had been going on for a long time before the Walleyes even existed. But the Walleyes did get more explanation, just not where they came from, as shortly into JoJolion, it's revealed that the Walleyes have a similar effect as the Devil's Palm from Steel Ball Run, as being near them will sometimes induce a stand ability, but in a slightly different way, as the people who were granted stand abilities by at the time what we thought were the Walleyes was because of their activity at the area where the Walleyes would later form, as Ojiro's childhood home was located where the Walleyes would later appear, and Higashikata fell into a fault at the same area, but again before the Walleyes sprouted out of the ground. So we are led to believe that for whatever reason the Walleyes granted these stands, but then nope, Kyoniji Murakira drops the bombshell that it's just the land in general around where the Walleyes sprouted that has special powers, and that it really wasn't the Walleyes that did anything, as the ground has had its ability before the Walleyes appeared. And the ground around the coast in Higashikata Estate we have talked about in another video involving Johnny Joestar and corpse parts, but other than just theorizing, nothing about that land has been explained yet. And since then, the Walleyes haven't really done anything at all, or really haven't even been mentioned since early JoJolion. So what the hell is the point of them, and where did they come from, and why did they sprout? This was clearly a plot point that was going to be pursued later in JoJolion based on how it had no explanation from the scientific field, so it had to be related to stands or something supernatural. But it appears Araki has seamlessly wrote it out of the story, never mentioning it or even drawing them as of recently, and having no relevance in the part's current state. I mean, in early JoJolion, you would always see the Walleyes in the background near the Higashikata State or just anywhere really in Morio. Araki would constantly be drawing them to bring great attention to them, but as of recently, I can't think of the last time we saw the Walleyes in a chapter. And I know we've been more in the city of Morio and not so much near the Higashikata Estate, but still. So will we ever get an explanation for the Walleyes? I really hope so they're not just another one of those things left up to Araki forgot or changed his mind, because they really were an interesting concept, giving this different Morio its own unique feeling. So moving on to the next plot point that needs resolve is the bite marks, which are also tied into the Walleyes and are probably the biggest unexplained mystery of the entire part so far. What we know is that certain characters, being Josuke, Joshu, and Yasuo, received exceptionally strong stand abilities after receiving strange bite marks by what can only be assumed to be from the Walleyes, as all of their bite marks have appeared after just hanging out around the Walleyes, which actually gives them more of a purpose and connects them to something, which gives me a bit more faith in them being explained at some point. Only if it wasn't for the bite marks seeming to be just as forgotten as the Walleyes at this point. I mean, at first it was pretty simple to conclude that the bite marks were just something like a stand arrow that grants a stand, but after a time we were introduced to a plethora of other stand users who didn't have bite marks, and rather the bite mark stand users began to be the very, very small minority of stand users throughout JoJolion, only being 3 of them. And really, the bite marks wouldn't even be a big deal if it wasn't for the fact that they are bite marks, implying that something or someone bit them. So what the hell was it that specifically left deep bite marks on these characters? Surely it wasn't just Tsurugi's rock dog running around biting people granting stands. I mean, I wouldn't have a problem with that, because that would be the most amazing thing ever, having this alternate universe version of a stand arrow being a dog. So although the theory of the dog biting people and granting stands is pretty much blasphemy and makes absolutely no sense, that's just what I want to happen. So the Walleyes and bite marks tie into each other and seem to clearly be connected, just left unexplained. When reading early JoJolion, for some reason I always thought that Josuke would at some point enter the Walleyes to reveal something explaining a lot of questions like what are their purpose, as well as the bite marks, but I don't think that is what's going to happen now. So with the big ones like Walleyes and bite marks out of the way, there are actually quite a few more plot points I think need to be addressed by the end of JoJolion, but just with not as much substance to them. One of the bigger ones being the man in Josuke's flashback, again very early in the part, only on chapter 5. Josuke, while under attack by the fun user Ojiro, asks himself, who am I and who is the enemy? And at that moment he suddenly sees a man in his memories at the Walleyes, and he says, I know this man's face, but I don't know who he is. And since then, this man has never been mentioned or seen again, so the most logical explanation is that this man is either from Kira or Josefume's past, possibly one of their fathers, or possibly even a rough draft for Damo Tamaki, who would appear much later in the chapter, when we know Araki, in JoJolion especially, is infamous for redesigning characters. So this memory clearly came from either Kira or Josefume, and Damo was one of the last people they both saw before becoming Josuke, and it was in fact at the Walleyes, so it would make sense for this person to be Damo, but he just doesn't look like him at all. But one thing that is undisputable is this nameless character's striking resemblance to Joben in the face as well as his hair, except for the hair clip. But I don't think Kira or Josefume knew Joben, so I really have no idea where this was supposed to be going, if in fact this person was a rough draft for Joben. Although it can be left up to a lot of theorizing by the community whether he's irrelevant and Araki forgot, or he's going to show up and be the main villain. Probably not the later. My best guess for this is that this was supposed to be the first scene of Damo Tamaki as Josuke was under attack, and maybe it triggered some sort of flashback for Josefume or Kira's mind that showed their last attack being Damo. The next thing that is more in the realm of possibility to actually be explained is Holly Joestar Kira's condition. What is she suffering from, be it the rock disease or something similar, and why is she being affected by it? Although she is a direct descendant of Johnny Joestar and Rina Higashikata, it has never been mentioned before that that side of the family has suffered from the rock disease, because Kira Yoshikage or Kyo Nijimura/Kira have not been affected by the rock disease either. And similar to the Walleys, Holly's medical condition has not been able to be identified by the scientific field, leaving it into the realm of stands and supernatural abilities. Similar to the rock disease, but it doesn't make sense why she would have the rock disease. But with the most recent chapters of JoJolion establishing the fact that the enemy opposing Josuke and Mamazuku are doctors and scientists, and Holly is an ophthalmologist, a doctor who specializes in eye and optical surgery. Just an interesting connection, as when we see her in JoJolion, she is in a hospital surrounded by doctors, and it just so happens that she gave Josuke motivation to find the new Rokakaka and bring it directly to her. A doctor in a place flooded with doctors and scientists, but this is just personal theorizing at this point. Holly Kira Joestar main villain? No, definitely not, but I mean, where else is JoJolion going right now? So this next one really isn't much of a plot point, but rather just wondering where a character went. Kyo Nijimura Kira. A really damn cool and interesting character with their own motive and seemingly enemy double agent to the Higashikata family that just didn't go anywhere after just her entire storyline never touched upon or pursued. And based on where we are currently in JoJolion and what's happening, I don't see her character really pursuing any of her motives. As I'm sure you've noticed, pretty much all of the plot points I have presented in this video that I believe need to be addressed by the end of JoJolion are all from the part's infancy, very, very early in the part. So I'm greatly concerned that Araki has changed the original story he had intended for JoJolion much more than we had thought, with possibly things like the Walleys and the bite marks being a major part of the story for its entirety, more so than the shift to the Rokakaka. But I'll have as much faith as possible and hope that by the end of this bizarre adventure, everything will come full circle and most of our questions will be answered. Oh, and one more thing that I really hope is addressed is Tsurugi's rock disease. I know I already made an entire video about him and his future in the part, but if JoJolion ended without any resolution for Tsurugi, it would just feel so wrong, as his inevitable suffering of the rock disease has been foreshadowed multiple times, and things would just feel so unfinished knowing that we didn't get to see what happened to him when he suffered from his rock disease and who had to sacrifice themselves to save him. I just feel like Tsurugi's age and the timing of the part is just too perfect for it not to happen. I mean, if Araki really didn't want this to be an issue of having Tsurugi suffer from the rock disease in the part, he easily could have just made Tsurugi older and have already suffered from the rock disease, and since his mother and Jobin's wife is an irrelevant character anyways, he could have just said that she sacrificed herself to save Tsurugi. Or he could have just made Tsurugi 7 or 8 years old, being just as competent, but just not that close to suffering from the rock disease. And Araki easily could have tied Tsurugi into Kato's character, say if Tsurugi's mother and Jobin's wife sacrificed herself to save him, that would have gave Kato just more motivation that she will not let her life be decided by a man. So I believe that there is a specific reasoning for Tsurugi to be in the current state that he is in. So as for now, these are the current plot points that I believe need to be addressed before JoJolion's ending. I may have overlooked some things that you guys may think are important to the story, so let me know any other plot points I didn't mention that you think should be touched upon before the part's conclusion. Anyways guys, that's a video. Like if you enjoyed, or if I fought your boredom, and of course subscribe for more videos. Thank you all